Yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. What I'm hoping to do in this 1 hour is give you a little bit of overview of what Azure as a cloud looks like and how do you actually do integration on Azure. Right? Uh, I'm not sure about all of you, but some of you have just had a chat. You guys come from integration background. And I think I made it quite clear on the event page that this is mostly for the people who are coming from integration background. But if you're not, that is still fine. It's not that you have to have some kind of integration background to learn Azure integrations. I've had many college students who have just started on Azure, and sometimes it proves to be better option to not have any past knowledge of integration, because then you keep using those old patterns. Not to say that it's having any kind of integration experience, whether it be on Bistock, on IBM, on MuleSoft, it would be really helpful to understand the concepts on Azure. I'm gonna just as a quick, before I get started, and because there is this FIFA favor all over the place. Do you guys, any of you are following football?
Me.
Anyone has any favorite team?
Not me. Mayur.
Not really. Okay. It's just a interesting question, because I kind of ask this type of question to different people of different with different background, and I've never found the people who are in IT to be particularly interested in any kind of sports other than cricket. I don't know why, but yeah. I'll start sharing my screen and let's just get started.
Mayur, cricket is a Indian thing.
It could really be that. Yeah,
It's born with us, isn't it?
absolutely. All right. I'll share my screen and we'll just get started. Anyone has any question before we start? Do you have any other expectations that I just mentioned? Please let us know.
So what is the motivation to give free training on these tools, on the Azure integrations? Because the people are getting training, paid training in different places, they are charging a lot more money.
Yeah.
And what your motivation to give free training on this platform?
My motivation is that I want to expose you guys to my upcoming cohort, which is much more detailed training on Azure. But it's not just that. I'll send you links to some of my YouTube playlist where you can literally learn everything for free if you have some background knowledge about Azure. Right? But as I don't want to kind of sound salesy. I'm not a salesman. So that's why, in the beginning, I introduced my motive that I'm teaching this new course on May 1. It starts next week. And to prepare myself and to prepare a larger audience who might want to join that course, I'm teaching this 1 hour free workshop. And this would give you a taste of what Azure integration looks like. And if you think this is good, if you think you want to learn more, you're more than welcome to join my cohort that starts next week. In that, I'll towards the end of this video, I'll show you exactly what I'm going to cover in my cohort. And the another motive is that I could just put out videos on LinkedIn and ask you to watch them, but this new type of learning or cohort-based courses, I'm not sure if you guys have heard about them, but it's more like community-based learning. You are in a small group of people who are all like-minded, who all have similar mindset. They all get together a couple of weeks, few hours here and there. And then in those small group, they learn. It's a community-based learning. It's more effective. That's why I'm joining Maven. And that's why I'm kind of doing this workshop to give you a taste of not just Azure integration, but how community-based learning looks like, right? And yeah, any feedback that you have towards the end of it, I would really appreciate that. I'll share my screen and we'll just get right into it. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, yes, Mayur.
Yeah, yes.
All right. So my goal, as I clearly mentioned on the event page, I want to build your first integration. I want to help you build your first integration on Azure. Depending on whether you already have your Azure subscription or not, but I would really like you to be able to build this one integration with me on Azure. And here is a sample integration scenario that I've picked. You can have any other scenario in your sample integration, but this is kind of one scenario that pretty much every integration developer would have seen in their career, some or the other flavor of this, right? Where you have some sort of e-commerce platform or ordering platform where someone orders an item and then you have to integrate some or the other way with the ERP system. So in this case, we are working with this bike company. They're selling bikes and they have an e-commerce store. And when someone orders any bike, you understand that there are many flows that needs to get triggered, right? In the bespoke world, you would start getting messages on your web service or in the MSNQ. In other integration platforms, there are many different ways you receive notifications of any change that happens, and you need to take this change to downstream systems. In this case, we are just picking one downstream system, which is the ERP system, and it has a database called bike stores. And every time someone orders a new bike, you need to make some sort of integrations that updates this ERP system that an item has been sold, so decrease or change the inventory or stocks for that particular store that this item has now been sold. So inventory has always been updated. This is very simple integration scenario, right? I'm just taking very basic one so that everyone kind of understands where we are going with this. Before we start building any component, let's just understand the requirements technically. Right? So what we really need to build in order to achieve this integration, right? So first of all, the e-commerce store, it's not, you not build it, it's built by another team. Let's say there is a .NET or a Java based team that has built this website for your company. So you need to give them an API. Every time they receive an order, they would call your API and let you know that we've received this order for this particular item. Go ahead and do whatever you need to do with this, right? So we need to first of all build one API that would receive the e-commerce order. Once we receive that e-commerce order, we need to send that to some sort of storage. In different words, you may have used MSMQ, you may have used database tables where this event gets stored. And from there, you trigger downstream systems. In the Azure world, there is something called service bus. Service bus is in Bistock, there's MSMQ. In IBM, there is MQ series, right? So these are queues and topics where you can store any sort of data. So as soon as this API receives any order update, it is going to send that update to a service bus queue. And as soon as the message is received in the queue, there would be a logic app. Logic app is equivalent to an orchestration of any type, right? You can basically define your workflow inside your logic app. So logic app would get triggered every time a message is received in the queue. This logic app would now go and insert or update. This logic app would update the database tables of ERP system, right? Now, this is a very generic scenario. A lot of things can change here. For example, instead of API, you may receive a message in your database. You may receive a message in the queue on this side as well. In the ERP system, instead of database tables, you might be calling their web services, so a lot of different possibilities are available here. But I'm picking this one to kind of test different services within Azure. So just a very high level. On my left here, you see LA ecom orders, that's one logic app. This is your first API. So what we need to build is we need to build one logic app that would act as an API where your e-commerce would send any order updates. And this logic app needs to send that update to something called orders topic. This is a service bus topic. Now, if you noticed here, service bus, I've mentioned Q/T. So service bus has two type of functionalities, basically. There's a service bus queue and service bus topic. Without going into much detail, if I explain you very briefly, service bus queue can store messages from one publisher and it can have one subscriber. So it's coming from one place and it's going to one place. It cannot send the same message to multiple subscribers. Right? So it's one person who's sending the message, one person who's reading the message. Whereas in the service bus topics, you have multiple subscribers. You can create one topic and then you can add multiple subscribers. For example, ERP system would have one subscriber. Your sales system might have another subscriber to the same message. So here we are creating one topic. We will name that topic orders. And every time a message is received in this topic, you can have n number of subscribers receive that message. In this case, we are going to build the first logic app, which is again going to get triggered every time a message is received in this topic. We'll call this logic app LA orders ERP. LA is basic naming convention can be different, but the way I use is LA stands for logic app. It's what exactly it's working on. It's working on orders and then it's sending it to ERP. So this is how I'm naming my logic app, right? So we need to build three components. First logic app, a topic, and a second logic app, right? Are you clear about the requirement? Any questions on the requirement? Now I'll get started on the build part. So before I move on to the build part, do you have any question on the requirement?
Oh, it's very clear, Mayur.
Okay, it's a very simple and very generic requirement, right? So it's easy to understand. Okay. Now are you still seeing my screen? Is it stopped?
Stopped. We don't see your screen, Mayur.
Okay, sure, 1 second.
I have done similar kind of thing by using the other integration platform, not Biztalk, not the same way, but close to.
Sure. Yeah, this is pretty much, any
company that MuleSoft.
Okay, yeah, and any company that
MuleSoft and uses our JMS, yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay. I also want to, before we move on to Azure, I want to show you something, the structure or hierarchy of resources on Azure. Again, let me share my screen. Okay. So, you might be used to different type of environments, right? You have dev environment, QA, test, seed, prod, different type of environments. And then within those environments, you have your artifacts. In cloud, we're talking about serverless. Everything goes serverless, unless you have VM and then you install a software on VM. That's just your same Biztalk on the cloud, right? But with integrations on Azure, we are not working on a defined scope of a virtual machine. So the way resources are grouped and organized, they're like this. So here is your company. Company would have a subscription. They can have more than one subscription, by the way. And every subscription has a billing account. So they pay for each subscription. Every time any resources are used under that subscription, company has to pay for that subscription consumption. Okay. So company can have more than one subscription. Under the subscriptions, you have something called resource groups. So these are resource groups. Again, it's a virtual grouping of all of your resources, right? So you can have multiple resource group for each environment. So here is one for dev, another one for test, another one for prod. This is not the only way. I've seen some companies use subscription as their different environments. It's not common, but it's not that it cannot be done, right? You can have one subscription for your dev environment, one subscription for your test, but this is not a common practice. The most common practice is that under a subscription, you will have multiple resource groups. And then under each resource group, you will have many of your Azure services that you would use. You may have heard some of these names: Azure Functions, Logic App, your storage account, Service Bus, right? So when you create any of your new services or new components on Azure, you are asked to select your subscription, and then you are also asked to select your resource group. And using DevOps, when you promote all of these two different environments, that's when basically you are replacing your resource group name and promoting it to different resource group. I hope this is clear. We'll now move on to actual Azure portal, and we'll start building our integration scenario. So here I'm on my Azure portal. Are you familiar with this portal? Have you worked with this before? Any of you?
Yeah, I
Yes.
did.
Yeah, give up.
Okay. And just in case if you don't have any access to this portal, Microsoft gives you about $200 to spend for 1 month, 30 days, if you create your trial account on Azure, right? So if you don't have it yet, if you don't have access to any subscription or resource group, please feel free to create your free account, but make sure you also kind of delete all the resources. Otherwise, after 30 days, it would start charging you drastically. But yeah, so you can create your free subscription, and then that's where we get started. So here I have my subscription. I'm one of the users of this enterprise subscription, so I have this subscription. So let's click on that subscription, and then we'll start creating resource group inside the subscription, right? So as soon as I go inside this, it will show me all of the details about this subscription. But if I go back to the home page, I can see all of my resources here as well. But a better view is on the home page, right? So I'll go to the home page, and let's create a new resource group, right? You can also search. I've been using this, so it's giving me all of these icons here. If you're opening it first time, you may not see all of these icons. So if I go to the resource groups, it would show me any existing resource groups, right? So I have this dev RG, prod, test RG, and then I've already created workshop RG resource group because I wanted to have the database ready for the experiment. But you can simply create a new resource group from here. Here you give the name of the resource group. And then you also need to select where do you want to host, what's the region that you want to host your resource group. This would most likely be your closest data center. Right? So in my case, if I'm working for a client who's based in UK or Europe, I'll choose one of these UK data centers. And that's it. You just go ahead and create your resource group. So I'm not going to create that. I'll skip that option for now because we've already created this workshop resource group. And now we need to create our logic app, our service bus, and the topic inside the service bus. So again, going back to this design, what should I create first? If I create this one, it needs to send messages to the topic, so I cannot complete the development. If I create this logic app, it needs to receive messages from this topic, right? So I'm saying I first need to create a topic. In order to create a topic, I need to first of all create a service bus namespace. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a service bus namespace. Here, I'll just click on this create icon. This is to create any kind of services on Azure. And I'll just search for service bus. Here you go, service bus. And let's create, this is the service bus that we need to create. Let's create a new service bus. This is called service bus namespace, by the way. And inside the service bus namespace, you can have multiple queues and topics. So here, if you see, it's asking me to select the subscription, and then the only one I have is this one, so it's auto selected, and then it's asking me to select a resource group. So I'm selecting workshop resource group. I need to give a name to my service bus namespace. So let's give it workshop service bus. Okay, and where do I want to host this? I'll again choose UK South. And there are 3 pricing tiers, basically premium, standard, and basic. I'm going to choose standard for now. And let's create. So it's going to do a quick review. If there are any issues, anything that you missed, it would give you a warning here. But now that validation is succeeded, let's go ahead and create this service bus namespace.
Yeah, I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, we are creating the resource group.
Yeah.
Resource group locations and the service bus location, we need to given the same or different?
It needs to be in the same location. Yes.
Yeah, okay. If I given the different location, if any problem occurs or?
Well, you can say it can still connect across the internet, right? But it's best
Yeah.
if you're using in the same location. Okay, it's not that it has to be the same location. You can have different location, because ultimately you would be connecting using the connection string, which would be entire endpoint, right? But
Yeah,
it's,
okay.
it's best practice if your integration is internal, it's within your company scope, it's better to have it all in the same region.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Okay, it would just take a couple of minutes and it would create this service bus namespace. Here it's done. So let's just go to the resource. The resource is the service bus namespace that we just created. And now it would allow us to create a queue or a topic. So let's create a topic. I'll give it a name, orders. I'll leave all of these properties default right now. There's not much to play around with it. Let's create a topic. And if we scroll down here on the left panel, you can see queues and topics. So if the topic is created, we would see it here. You can see the order topic has been created, right? And if you remember what I just mentioned a few minutes ago, in the topics, you can have multiple subscriptions, right? So let's go ahead and create our first subscription as well. So you can have multiple subscribers. You can receive the same message, consider a pub sub mechanism, right? The same way BizTalk works, where one publisher is publishing a message and then you can have multiple subscribers. So let's create our first subscription for ERP. I'll just, for simplicity's sake, I'll just give it a name ERP sub, right? And max delivery count, I'll go with 10 for now. You can have, between 1 and 2,000 maximum delivery counts. There are many other features of the topics that we can cover more in detail. But right now, I'll just go with 10. And again, I'll leave all of these details as default for now. There we go. Our subscription has also been created here. You can see we can have multiple subscriptions here, right? Okay, so let's go back to the requirement. We've created this orders topic, right? Now, what we need to do is you need to create this first logic app, which is going to essentially be an API. Number one here, this e-com order API would receive the order details from the e-commerce store, right? So let's start creating the logic app, and this is the name that we want to give it. So let's get the name. Sorry, were you seeing the, let me share my entire screen. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was sharing the screen. I'll share the entire screen so I can switch between windows and you don't have to worry about it. Okay. So let's go to the our home, and here we'll start creating a new resource. Let's type in logic app. By the way, some of these windows, okay, where we are creating the window plus this window, Microsoft keeps changing the UI, but pretty much it does the same thing. So if you log in a month later, if you see a different UI, don't get worried. You know, it's basically it's gonna do the same thing. It's just more or better. All right, so let's create a logic app. Again, it's asking me the subscription and resource group. So I'll select workshop resource group. And here is my logic app name. Now here you can see you can create automatically, you can create this in a container, right, as a Docker container. But right now we'll just go with the workflow. The region, again, I'll choose UK South. Now, this is very important. Pay good attention to this. This can cause you money. That's why. There are two different plans in Logic App. One is the consumption plan, and another one is a standard plan. So for now, while you're learning this, make sure you select consumption so that it only charges you as you use it. If you create and if you don't use it, it will not charge you, right? The standard logic app is one of the newer variants of logic app where you can actually define the infrastructure behind your logic apps. You can actually define how much CPU, how much memory, how much storage you need to use. And logic app standard is the way to go. So in future, you would be actually using logic app standard. It's closest to the best hybrid integration platform. There are so many features, so many out-of-the-box supported features which are part of logic app standard and not in consumption. But it has a huge cost associated with it. So while you're learning it, I would strongly suggest continue using consumption-based logic app. Right? Let's go ahead and create this logic app. Validation is complete. Let's create. Again, it would just take few minutes, few seconds usually, and it would create the logic app for you. There we go. So logic app has been created for us, and it's ready for us to start working on actual development of the logic app. Now you noticed I'm doing all of this development on my browser, right? That's one of the beauty of this Azure. You can do pretty much everything right here on browser. But in real world, when you're actually working on the real projects, you can use Visual Studio because you also need to use your code repository, right? Azure DevOps or GitHub, wherever you want to store your code. So for that purpose, you can use Visual Studio. But for some of the smaller integrations, or just for the learning purpose, you can do everything on browser. So let's go to the logic app. And for people who have never opened this logic app designer, it would give you some templates to begin with. Here is a quick introduction to logic apps. And then there are some templates, right? So for example, if you wanna receive a message in service bus queue, if you click here, it would start that template where you start receiving message from a queue, right? I strongly recommend you to go through all of these samples. There are some really nice samples already built for you. So even if you don't use it, you can get a lot of idea of how to build the integration using logic apps. But for our purpose, we would start with a blank logic app. Okay. So when you start with logic app, a blank logic app, the first thing that you have to do is create a trigger, right? How do you want to trigger this logic app? If we go back to the design, this logic app is going to be an API, which will be called by your e-commerce application, right? So in order to build an API, your trigger needs to be your HTTP call, right? So the easiest way to create this is just type in HTTP. It would give you the option of HTTP trigger. You don't need to build any components or any pipelines or anything. Here you go. You see this request button, right? Let's click on that. And it shows you when an HTTP request is received, that's when this logic app would get triggered. Let's click on that. And that's it. Our first shape of logic app has been created, and first shape is called trigger. And any subsequent shapes that we would add, they are called actions in logic app, right? So there can only be one trigger and n number of actions that you want. Now, as soon as I save this logic app, because this is an API, it is going to generate the URL for me for this API, right? And by default, it's starting with the post action. But if I wanted to make this a get API, I can change that from settings. I can go to settings and I can change this. Sorry, here in the method, not settings. In the method, I can change this to get or any other methods, right? For now, we'll continue with the post. And let's save this, and it would generate the URL for us. Apologies for the dogs barking. Okay. So here is the URL. Let's copy this URL, and I'm going to paste that on my Postman. We'll create a new request. It's a post request. Let's just get the URL here. Okay. So my API is ready to start accepting request, but I also need to define what exactly I want to receive as part of the request, right? So I have a very small JSON message. This JSON message has order ID, customer ID, and mainly the quantity of this particular product. Okay. This is what we would receive from the e-commerce application. So let's copy this JSON. And here you see it says use sample payload to generate schema. Let's use this option so you don't have to manually craft the schema, right? There we go. The schema has been created for us, and let's again hit save. So our API is ready to receive messages. Now, next thing we want to do is this API needs to send this message to this topic, right? Let's go ahead and add the next action. So here, new step. And because topics and queues are part of service bus, I'll just type in service bus. It would give me all of the actions that's available for service bus. Okay, let's select the service bus. And then you can see there are so many actions that you can do from this logic app, right? What we want to do is we want to send a message. So let's look for an action that says send message, which is here, send message to the service bus. Let's click on that action. And anytime you create any new action first time, it would ask you to create a connection. This is just like any, connection to any new services. Next time onwards, you would start using the same connection. So it would not ask you to create this connection again. I'll give it a name, SB Con, and then it's asking us to select how do we want to authenticate while this logic app communicates with the service bus queue or topic, right? So we need to get a connection string. Let's open another tab of Azure. Let's go to this service bus and let's get that connection string. Okay, let's go to the service bus. And let's click on this workshop service bus, the one that we created. In this workshop service bus, you see it has something called shared access policies. Let's click on that. If the policy has not been created, or if you want to create a custom policy, you can create a new one. But by default, there is this root managed share access key. This policy is already created by default. And here you can see you have primary key, secondary key, and you also have primary and secondary connection strings, right? So all we need to do is just copy this connection string. Let's copy it over to this connection here. And let's create. This would create your connection that would allow the logic app to communicate with the service bus. Right? So connection has been created, as you can see, connected to this connection, right? Now it's asking us to select the topic name. And so as soon as you click here, it would show you all the available topics. For now, we've only created one topic. So it's giving you the topic orders. And then you need to attach the actual body that you receive from the HTTP request, right? So you need to select a new parameter. And you can see there are so many different parameters. For now, we'll just focus on the content parameter. We want to pass the content. And the best part is in this logic app, it would give you all of the available options right here. Every time there is a new option to add something, you don't need to even remember the syntax of it. You can simply look for the dynamic content. And in this one, basically, I only have one action, which was the HTTP request. So let's see what's available from the HTTP request. As you can see, it has body available. It has headers, queries, path parameters, right? Because we already gave a schema, it's also giving me all of the value items from the JSON. But for now, what I want to do is I want to pass the entire body to this service bus topic. So I've selected the body. Let's save this. And that's pretty much it. My logic app is ready. This is an API. Every time I send a message to this URL, it is going to create a new message into this topic. Let's go to the subscription and we'll do a quick test. So right now there are 0 message count, right? If I hit send for this, let me send a JSON message, simple JSON. If I send this, it is going to trigger this logic app and we would see a new message in the topic. That is done. Let's refresh this and this message count should increase to 1. There we go, right? And if you go to the run history of this logic app, basically it would show you exactly what has happened. So in this logic app view, there is something called run history. And you can see it was executed 3:48 p.m. and it has been succeeded, right? So our first half of the part we've just completed the first and second portion. The half of the work that we need to do is already created for us, right? Let's move on to the third component, which is another logic app, but I want to pause and ask if you have any questions up until now.
Not me, Mayur. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, let's move on to the creating of next logic app, which is going to be our subscriber logic app, right? Here is the name that we want to give. Again, I'll just go to create a new tab so that I can see the previous logic app as well. Building any integration on Azure is relatively much simpler and easier because you're not dealing with different environments or dispersed components. It's easier to create and connect everything together. Okay, let's create a new resource. And again, let's create a logic app. So let's search for logic app. Let's hit create. I'll select the resource group. I'll give it a name. I'll select the location. Again, be very careful, select consumption, not standard. Let's create. Okay, and just to review quickly, what we need to do here is this logic app should get triggered every time a message is received in this topic. And then this needs to call or update the database basically. And we need to pass the quantity to update in this database, right? So just for the saving time, what I've done is I've already created a sample database called bike stores. And it has this table called production.stocks, right? And I'm also filtering it with store ID 1 and product ID 1 to 10. So here is the table that we are interested in. And my IP changed, so it's now asking me to again add the new IP so that I can connect using the SQL. So let's do that. Azure is inherently secure. A lot of things that we have to think about, you can skip in Azure. A lot of things are by default taken care for you. So sorry for this interruption. I just need to add my IP address in the firewall so that I can connect using the SQL Management Studio. So I'll simply go to the database here and firewall. Okay. And I've already created a stored procedure that's going to accept 3 parameters and it would update this database. So we are not working on stored procedure. I don't want to focus on that right now, but the stored procedure has already been created beforehand. So now
this database is on premises.
no, this is also on Azure, but
Okay.
you can connect to on-premises database. Yeah.
Okay.
This one is on Azure right now, right? So I have this stored procedure already created. So let's go to this new logic app that we just created. Remember, we would need to create a trigger every time a message is received in a topic. We want to trigger this logic app. In the first logic app, we created a logic app that had HTTP trigger. So it became an API itself. Now we need to select a trigger from service bus. And when a message is received in a topic subscription, when a message is received in a topic subscription, and it also says autocomplete. I will not go in the details, it would take more time, but there are two ways of receiving messages. One is peak lock, another one is autocomplete. For now, for the simplicity's sake, I'll just go with autocomplete. So now I need to select my topic. So let's see what topic I have available. Right? We've created one topic, which is orders. And then I also need to select a subscription. So if you remember here, we created this subscription called ERP sub, right? So let's select that subscription, ERP sub. And how often do I want to check this queue, right? So frequency, I'll keep it for 1 minute, but you can change this frequency as you know, based on your requirements. And let's save this logic app. So every time a message is dropped into that topic, this logic app would get triggered. And the next thing it needs to do is it needs to connect to this SQL database that is on premises, right? So, sorry, not on premises, it's on the cloud right now. So I'll add next step. And now I need to select action, which is a SQL server, right? So I can simply select from here, or I can just type in SQL and select SQL server. So this is just let me take 1 minute to explain what these actions are. Azure has already created connections to pretty much every business systems that you can think of, right? You can see many of these you may have used, you may have heard of them. Any kind of ERP system, database system, even including AWS and Google, storage systems, you already have ready-made connectors. So you don't need to work on building the connector. You just need to get started working with the connector, right? So in this case, we are selecting a SQL server. And what we need to do is we need to execute a stored procedure, but you can see there are several actions that you can select, right? I'll go with the execute stored procedure. And because we're connecting for the first time, I need to create a connection. I'll quickly create a SQL connection. You can give whatever name naming convention you can choose. Authentication type, I'll go with SQL Server Authentication server name. Let me quickly grab that. Database name is Bike Stores. And here you see this gateway. This is, when you need to connect to an on-premises SQL server, you need to create a Azure gateway, on-premises data gateway. If you need to connect to any kind of on-premises system, right? So even if it's a file system or database or any other system which is on-premises, you can use this gateway to connect to that. Okay, so connection has been created. Let's select the server name, which is already there. Let's select the database name. Again, we've already given the database name. And let's select the stored procedure. Because we've selected this action called execute stored procedure, it has already retrieved all of the available stored procedures for us. So we already have one stored procedure. Let's click on that. As soon as we click on this stored procedure, it would give you the options to select parameters, right? These are the same parameters that stored procedure has created to receive as an input parameter, right? So let's select all of these parameters. And you can see, you can pass value to these parameters. We need to pass the values from the incoming JSON. There's one more thing we need to do before we can actually retrieve the JSON message. Here, when you send messages to the topic, I'm going to the first logic app run history. I want to show you one quick bit. I'm sorry, we're gonna run over just 5 or 10 minutes of time. Apologies for that, but I really want to cover a couple of bits here. So when you send a message to a queue, Azure automatically encrypts that so that the messages are always encrypted. You don't have to explicitly do anything, right? But then when you receive the message, you also need to decrypt that message, right? And once you decrypt, you also want to parse that message as a JSON so that you can use individual fields from the JSON. So I'll add another action. So there is this action called parse JSON. Sachin, can you go on mute? Sachin, can you go on mute, please? Okay. All right. So there is this action called parse JSON, which would allow us to parse the incoming JSON. Let's search for parse JSON. And parse JSON action is basically part of this data operations, right? So I can select data operations. You can do a lot of different data operations. I'm going to choose parse JSON for now. And here, content should be whatever content you received in this topic. But we also have to decrypt the content. It doesn't automatically decrypt for us, right? So inside this dynamic content, you have something called expression. This is where you can type any kind of .NET or C# type expressions, programmatic expressions. So I know it's a base 64 encryption, so I'm going to decrypt it to base 64 to string. And I'll go back to the dynamic content, and you can see here that it's showing you what options you have available from the first action, right? So I have the content coming from the service bus topic. So let's add the content here. So now this parse JSON would already decrypt the incoming JSON. And again, we need to decrypt we need to parse the JSON. So let's give it a defined schema, right, from the sample message. That's it. Now, all of these individual properties are available to us to pass to this stored procedure. Again, let's click on this empty space, and you can see you can select all of these properties. So I need to pass a product ID. Let's select the product ID. This is all the incoming properties, right? Let's select the quantity. And let's also select the store ID. There you go. Let's save the logic app. So essentially what we've done is we've created these two logic apps and a service bus topic. So now if we trigger this logic app, it should trigger the entire flow. So let's quickly update this table and then check that. So we'll do a quick demo of our integration end to end for the first one. So store ID should be 1, product ID should be 1, and current quantity is 24. So let's do a quick run. Store ID is 1, product ID is 1, and quantity is 1. So as soon as I trigger this, this should actually decrease the quantity by 1, right? Let's see what happens. Okay, so this has successfully completed. There we go. Quantity has gone by 1. If I do the same thing, multiple quantities, let's say quantity 5. And what happens here is the first logic app would get triggered. And you can see in the run history, just like in the Bistock Vault, you would go to Bistock admin console and see, how many instances of any orchestration has been run. Here you can see the run history immediately. You can see exactly what request was received, quantity 5. Then it was sent to this service bus topic. The second logic app, if you see the run history, right, again, you can see exactly what you received. You received the encrypted message, which is this. We decrypted and we parsed it as JSON. So this is the decrypted JSON. And we parsed it into the actual JSON message so that we can use all of these properties. And when you executed this store procedure, these are the value that you passed. If something would go wrong, if this fails, this green would show you as a red. And you can actually see what has gone wrong. You would see all the errors and everything. Right, so that's the end-to-end flow. Now, there are a lot of things that we can do, right? It's just a high-level integration flow. If we need to add exception handling to it, we need to add a lot of other components to this, right? But in a nutshell, we are able to build an end-to-end integration in less than 1 hour. And then, now we need to enrich this integration. We need to start adding more and more details to that. So that was my way of showing you a quick round of how integration is done on Azure. I hope it's been helpful. If you have any questions, I want to really talk to you about that. But I'm sure you may have other plans of the day. I don't want to hold you back. But if you can stay back for a little bit of question answer, I can really appreciate that. Any questions, anything? But if you wanna, if you're running out of time, please feel free to leave. Thank you very much for your time. But any questions? Let's go over the questions.
So let's say we insert a subscribe section, we subscribe that payload, and then we insert into the SQL server. Right now we insert it as a single record.
Yeah.
What if we have, bunch of orders, let's say 5-10 orders in a single payload?
Yeah.
So the stored procedure we need to loop through, or do we need to, can we use a table?
Yeah, so there are 2 places you can do. You can send the entire batch to the stored procedure, or you can loop through in the logic app, right? So I'll go back to my screen real quick.
So usually in the Bistock, when we are sending those kind of bunch of orders, most of the times I use table type parameters in the stored procedure.
You can do that. You can do that.
Yeah.
And in the logic app itself, there is this control action. So if you go inside control action, you can see it has for each loop.
Yeah.
Right. It also has until loop. So you can actually go one by one and call stored procedure 5 times. Or if your stored procedure is able to accept a batch, you can pass the entire batch. Or when you're working with a larger batch, logic app is not a right option. For that, you need to use something called Azure Data Factory.
Correct.
And I really go into a lot of details into my course with 2 different type of scenarios. Logic app is for a lighter load. And when you have a huge batch to execute, logic app is not the right place to do that. So you do that on Azure Data Factory. I'm not sure if you've heard about that.
Yeah, I heard.
Right. Yeah. But really, really good question.
Yeah.
Manoj. Yeah. Thanks. I'm glad you like that. Any other questions? Anyone?
What was the shape you put on the decryption message part? So not the shape, the action. Sorry, I was.
Action. Which one? Let me share my screen if you can.
On the second logic apps to decrypt the message after receiving from subbus.
To decrypt, yeah.
this-
It's so because I know the first logic app, when it sends the message to the topic, it encrypts the message with base 64. So
Okay.
here what I did was I added an expression called base 64, and then you can see all of these are your well-known expressions that we use in SQL and .NET and Java, you know, all
Yep.
of the expressions. So one of these expression is called base 64 to string.
Okay.
So that's the expression I used. Now, if you have to do any complex programming on your message, you can use Azure Functions. Azure Functions allows you to code in your preferred language. It can be Java, Python, C#, whatever. You can actually write the entire function and then call the function from your logic app, you know, because this is a simple scenario. But in real life scenario, there are much more complex mapping, for example, right? So you can use your Azure function, call that function from your logic app, and that way you can do much more complex processing.
Okay. Yep.
Any other question? Anyone? Any other feedback? Anything?
I know there is one more question I have. I think we don't have time to build that on, but I have one more
Sure, please go ahead.
question. Like in the first scenario, when we publish the message into the queue, the message is publishing into the topic, and after that, in the postman, I think, I mean, in general scenario, when we just send a request, you know, the client or customers are expecting to receive some responses back, whether it is a 200 OK or 500 error,
You can.
kind of response back. I know we can do it that easily in Logic App. This is one of my input to, we can have that one into the first scenario.
Absolutely. So if you don't explicitly define your response, it would just give 202 accepted, right?
Right.
Giving any kind of response is as easy as adding another action. And now if you search for HTTP, it would give you the response. So if I select HTTP request, it would give me a response action. Sorry. Response, right? And I can have multiple responses. Actually, I can have 200 response. I can have any other explicitly, if I want to give any, you know, if on error, I want to give this response.
Right.
And this error. You can have parallel actions here. So I can add a parallel branch, for example, right? I can add two different responses. I can have an if-else condition here. Yeah, you can do all this. Nice. Yes, yes, absolutely.
I got it.
Yeah,
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to hold you back. If you have any questions, I'll be really happy to connect with you on LinkedIn or any other method of your choice. One last thing I want to ask before we go, can I get a real quick feedback from all of you? If you can just take out your phone and scan this code right now, it would take you to a page. I just have 6 real short questions. Would take less than 2 minutes for you to answer, but your feedback would be really, really helpful to me. So if you can do this now, that would be really helpful. And I'll send you the link of my course, which I'm
sorry, can you go back to the QR code, please?
Oh, my bad. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Maya. I got it.
Sure. And while we are already here, I'll send you a link, you know, to this course that I'm teaching next week. If you are interested, or if you think someone else you know might be interested, please share it with them. I'll send you a coupon code as well. So this course I'm teaching is a 2-week course. It costs £500. a lot of other students have also used their employer to kind of get some sort of reimbursement, because this is part of your learning and development, right? So you might want to include that somewhere. But basically, real quick, I'm going to teach for 4 active sessions, 2-hour 4 sessions, right? We'll go over all of the Azure services that you use in integration. Some of these are Logic App, Function App, Service Bus, API management. In the 3rd module, we look into the data side of things, like, for example, Azure Data Factory, various activities within Data Factory, Azure Data Lake, the analytics, Power BI, Synapse, all those kind of nice things. And then in the 4th module, we basically look at various certifications and which one you should do and what should be your path towards that certification, so that you can learn the required skills. And then during the 2 weeks, basically, we would be connecting exact this time, 10 a.m. EST for 2 hours. That is 8:30 p.m. Indian time, Friday, Saturday, and another Friday, Saturday. So starting next Friday for 4 days, we'll be connecting for 2 hours. And then I'll also have 1 hour of office hours every day. Again, everything happens on Zoom, right? So during that office hours, me, along with some of my past students, would be available to help you, because I'll be giving you a lot of weekly projects, a real-time integration scenario. You can come up with your own scenarios. And when you're building them, there would be 1 hour set as office hours every day to give you any feedback or to help you achieve those integrations, right? And this new platform called Maven is really amazing. I strongly recommend you to go and check it out. I'll send you a link in the chat right now. So if any of you is interested, please feel free. If you use workshop 25 coupon code, it would reduce 25% from this 500 pounds. Hopefully that should be some more motivation to connect over that course as well. Right? So yeah, and thank you very much once again for your time. We've gone quite 15-minute over. You guys still stick around, so I'm really appreciative of that. If any of you is still not connected to me on LinkedIn, please send me connection request. Otherwise, I will do that. But if I forget, let's connect over LinkedIn. Let's stay in touch. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a very good weekend.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Mayur. Bye.
Thank you for your time, Mayur. Thank you. Bye. Yeah.